plain, true. It is perfectly reasonable and logical that he will do so here as well. And lo and behold, when we read and we study and we do so with an open mind and an open heart, we find that. We find out what kind of love God is. We find out that God is justice, that God is hope, God is patient. Whew, I'm really glad for that one. So that, knowing that he reveals himself. Okay, now we get into some tough ones. Okay? Because I come to the scripture firmly convinced that there are absolutes. Absolutely. There are absolutes. This one we struggle with as a society. We really struggle with this. I've had conversation with folks that, there are no absolutes. You just professed one. There are no absolutes. If there's no absolutes, then what we have described for us in Judges, at the beginning of Judges, where every man did what was right in his own eyes, there is no order. It is pure chaos if there are no absolutes. If I turn loose of these things, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt they will fall to the ground. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to make it happen. It'll happen. That's an absolute. Gravity, it's an absolute. Now, there's places where gravity's weaker. There's places where gravity's stronger. There's places where gravity hardly exists. But gravity still is an absolute. I approach Scripture believing, full faith, that there is absolute. And part of that belief is truth. You remember when remember when Jesus was standing before Pilate? And Pilate was really struggling. He was really struggling with what to do here. He knew Jesus wasn't guilty. He didn't have a thing to throw at him. But he could see this huge mob, and he's quizzing Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I kind of picture some semi-private conversations with Jesus, between Jesus and Pilate. And what I mean by semi is I don't know for sure if Pilate took Jesus into a room, if you will, by himself, and it was just him and Jesus. Maybe that happened. But what I mean by semi is there's a huge crowd going on out here, and he pulls him up here to talk to him. And you remember when he's talking to him, and he asked Jesus, who are you? Tell me, don't you understand? I have the ability. And he says, you're the Son of God. And Jesus says, you said the truth. And Pilate says, what is truth? This guy was absolutely, totally confused as to what truth was. I'm not trying to justify Pilate. That's not my job to justify nor condemn him. But clearly this man was at a big conflict as to what is truth. Well, what I'm suggesting to us with Scripture is approaching Scripture understanding that truth exists. Truth exists. And if I do that and then approach this, I'll find it. Now, again, what I'm not saying, obviously I believe this is truth, but I'm talking about how we approach it. I approach this saying, absolutely truth exists. And I'm on a mission to find it. And I'm going to look here. That's the point I'm sharing. It's also, and we struggle with this one, maybe not so much as the other, but it's also, I believe, I approach Scripture understanding that things are complete. Completeness. I truly believe that completeness exists. In other words, there's not just some dangling, we're going to walk along and all of a sudden fall off the edge of the earth. There's order, there's completeness to all this that's going on around us. So I approach Scripture with that thought in mind. I'm watching the time, and I've got to speed up a little bit. Last thing is, I approach Scripture believing, full faith, that it's understandable. I can understand this. It might take me, I don't know about you, but I have to do this several times. It might take me 6 times reading something before I fully grasp it. It might take 14 different people explaining it to me before I finally grasp it. But I am convinced I can understand it. I know I can. Now I'm going to dive in and read it, study it, learn from it. Because if I approach Scripture saying, well, I don't think we can understand this, well, saying what you think about, you bring about. If you tell yourself you're not going to do it, you ain't going to do it. Or there's a high likelihood you ain't going to do it. So if I tell myself this is just too complicated, I'm not sure I can understand this, you're probably going to struggle to understand. I can understand this. I can understand Scripture. God doesn't want me to not understand Him. So I can do that. Okay. In our final time, what I want to talk about as we think about as we think about interpretation, we may have to go to next week. As we think about interpretation, the Bible teaches 3 different ways. And as I was reviewing this, I don't know about you, but the 3 different ways that the Bible teaches were ingrained in me in Rush Springs. I don't see Ashley Davison here this evening, but her granddad, his name was Cliff Werhan. He was our minister at Rush Springs. And her grandmother, Kay, is still... Yes. I'm going to have to stop and think, wait, no, it's great. No, it's grandmother and granddad. Sorry. Her grandmother, Kay, is still there. And these were just rock salt of the earth people. And Cliff just ingrained in us how the Bible teaches. And for the life of me, I'm like, why are we studying how the Bible teaches? What does it teach? That's what I'm interested in. But to understand how it teaches helps me understand, helps me to interpret it. So what do I mean by that? There's 3 ways the Bible teaches for us. I really believe we need to grasp a hold of this because the final 2 that we may not get to tonight, there's a teaser for you next week. Sorry, y'all have to come back. We have lost. We've lost them. We are straying away from them fast, and that's to our detriment. First and foremost, the Bible teaches by direct command. Thou shalt not murder. 1611 version. It's pretty clear. God does not want us to murder. That's a command. But He doesn't just stop. There's not just the thou shalt nots. Matthew chapter 22 says the 2 greatest commands, love the Lord your God. The second one is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. Those are commands. Those are direct commands. Easy for us to understand, correct? Societally, though, we still struggle with those. But let's be honest, all of us that have kids, did our kids struggle with direct commands? If you say your kids didn't struggle with direct commands, you need to come forward here in a little bit. I can remember Caleb. He's here tonight. He's great. But Caleb, don't stick things in the socket. You remember that? He'd go, okay. It's like, hit right in there. I'm like, Caleb, I just said, just testing it. Direct commands, be home by X time. He's got a watch. I know it works. Yeah, love him to death. Direct command, pretty easy, right? Example, the Bible teaches by example, uses example to teach us. Now, teaches by example in several different ways. For instance, we have examples within the Bible that we conduct ourselves. We referenced one a minute ago, Jesus Christ. We want to be like him. Okay, so that's an example. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, imitate me as I imitate Christ. That's Paul is being like Jesus. Paul wasn't elevating himself. I'm better than you, better than me. He's saying, look, I'm following after Jesus. Follow after me. Simple enough. What was and again, what is one of the ways, an example that we have from Paul? What value did Paul place on Scripture? 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 and 17, all Scripture is God-breathed and is work for you that will enliven our discussion next week. The Lord's Supper. Why do we take the Lord's Supper on Sunday? And why do we take it every week? You will not find a direct command to do so. That will dive into that next week. Okay.
As often as you meet my name, in remembrance of me.
That's a but good evening. Good to see everyone. That I love it. Welcome. We're glad you're here this evening. If you would take out some songbooks, we're going to sing some songs of praise together as these young men lead us. And then Phil, I believe you have the lesson, correct? The devotion. Yep. That's what I thought. Okay. Good. And then we'll. If you want to, 927 will be our song of encouragement. 927 is the song we'll use after Phil's lesson.
Number 23, our God, He is. There is beyond the azure blue